Hello, guten Tag, hola. This is NPM Packages, and by the end of this lesson, you should be able to install packages with NPM. So, what is an NPM package? What do you think it is?
Node package.
Nelly, what you got?
Node package.
So this is actually super interesting. NPM does not stand for Node Package Manager. It is not an acronym. That's why up in the corner, if you do that and then refresh. Stop it, stop it.
I think in the learned materials it actually says Node Package Manager.
Yeah, like it like sorta kinda like that's what everybody assumes it to mean. But strictly speaking, it's just 3 letters. So, and it's because it does some other things. This is why they kind of distance themselves from that. But yeah, Node Package Manager. What else? Let's start with this actually. What's Node? We haven't really talked about that before. What does the N in this mean? Tell you what, let's start by looking that up. Let's take a couple minutes and let's see if we can figure out what Node is. Because it's not the same thing as JavaScript. They're very closely related though. Go for it. What is Node? That's the question we're trying to answer. One more minute. Wow, jeez, I did not know that would happen at the end of that. For not being arrested. All right, I'd like you to turn and talk about what you found, see if we can get to some kind of shared understanding of what node is. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then Jessica, you talk to the other one.
Open source.
All right. Not. All right, so, no. So, like, it's, open source, JavaScript project. But I always thought it was not great information, right?
It's a binary style. Nodes are packages. With Node.js, Node.js, so pulling the package to your computer and installs it locally in that folder directory.
All right, let's get back together.
So the open source
All right, KS, volunteer to kick us off. Yeah, Christy.
It runs asynchronous.
Yep. So it's async. Specifically, it uses a runtime model called an event loop. We'll talk about that more in a sec. What else? Yeah.
It's a server-side solution that allows JavaScript and a few other languages to run.
Yep. Server-side JS. What else? Get anything else out of this?
Open source.
Yep. What else?
Node, well, to me, nodes are basically packages that you install locally on as specified.
NPM packages are installed locally. NPM kind of goes along with Node. What else? Other tidbits we found out. Yeah, Christy.
It's easy to build something that's scalable because there's no blocking.
Mm-hmm. Easy to scale because of this event loop. Anything else?
Big
Yeah.
distinction that it runs JavaScript, but it's not JavaScript.
Yes. Node runs JavaScript. What else runs JavaScript? Why is it this a special thing? What ran JavaScript before Node? Browser. So Node is an alternative to the browser. That's the big jump we're trying to make here. So specifically, so Chrome, it's a couple aspects to Chrome. Some of it is ironically referred to as browser Chrome. And so that's things like your bookmarks, the little interface with where you type the URL, this menu up here, all that stuff is called browser Chrome. So that's one thing that it does. Another thing that it does is it's HTML and CSS engine. So the one for Chrome right now. Let's see. Is Blink. So all of the HTML and CSS stuff is run with Blink. So Blink figures out where these elements on the page go, how color works. So any differences in those are generally due to differences in rendering engines. And then the JavaScript part of it, things like loading spinners, all that kind of stuff. Everything we do with JavaScript in the browser is a thing called V8. That's Chrome's. That's Chrome's JavaScript engine. The one for Firefox is called Quantum, but all it does is process JavaScript and interact with these pages. So for Chrome, that's Blink, V8, and the rest of it is browser Chrome. So around, I want to say 2006, a guy named Ryan Dahl said, hey, well, the V8 engine is open source. What if I ripped that out and just used it independent? So some things would have to be different. For example, like we have document, right? Document.querySelector, document.createElement. Well, if it's not in a browser, there's no document anymore. Document is its way to interact with Blink or whatever the rendering engine is. We also lose the window object. If you've ever done window.locator or whatever, that's how the engine can interact with the browser Chrome. So if we don't have a browser, we don't have the window object, we don't have the document object. But we still have loops, we still have everything else. What if that worked? Cool, so that became Node. So Node is the V8 engine plus the event loop, and the event loop that's used for Node, I'm spacing on the name right now, Node event loop is called libuv. That's it. And what libuv does is it's like the best way to think of this is you have one waiter in a restaurant, and you have all these people eating at the restaurant. I guess I can draw this. So they're sitting at these tables, people in the restaurant, and you've got a waiter, and then you've got the kitchen, and people who work in the kitchen, and then you have a waiter. And what the waiter does is it runs in circles and says, hey, does anybody need anything? Cool, got it. Drops it off with the kitchen, takes some more requests. Next time it goes to the kitchen, one of those things is ready, so it brings that to the right table, takes another order over here. All that's called the event loop. And so when we talk about something being async, that's what we mean. The way that it works, a different way you could do that, and this is how Rails works by default, is do the same thing. We have kitchen. We've got these three tables here. But the difference is that each one of those tables has their own waiter. Those are called threads. So each one of them, it is a synchronous operation, but they're taking up these threads. And on your computer, that's processor cores. Your processor core is doing one thing at a time. But if you have 8 of them, you have 8 waiters in the restaurant. Everybody else has to wait their turn. This is single-threaded, but that one thread works asynchronously. That's the other part of Node.
So that single-threadedness
Mhm.
allows for features like seeing, you're on a chat and seeing that the other person's writing a response, but it's not ready yet.
It's not new features. The real thing, because you can also do that with multi-threaded stuff. The biggest thing is that's a lot easier to scale, because if I run out of threads, my app just doesn't work. With this, it just gets slower. That's a much easier problem to solve. All right, so it's V8, it's libuv, that kind of like takes the place of the browser part of this. It figures out how this is going to get scheduled by the computer. And then it is the NPM ecosystem, by and large. So these three things really sort of make up Node. And what this looks like in action is if I go over here and I say, I make an index.js file and I say console.log some string, and then I do node index.js, it just runs the JavaScript. If I do something more complicated, array of characters, and I want to reduce that starts as an empty string. And I say that I want to string.join with character. Does join? No, concat. And then I try to run that. It doesn't do anything because I didn't log it. So I save that, and then I console log the result. I get ABC. I can just write some JavaScript and do some stuff. Now, since we don't have document and we don't have window, we actually get some other kind of neat things that let us do things like access the file system. That's something you can't do in a browser. Your browser can't directly access your file system. Node can, though. It's meant to run on servers. So you can save files, you can write files, you can do all kinds of wacky shit. And that's the kind of the TLDR on Node. I think that helps to understand what NPM is all about, but it's not otherwise directly related to our objectives. Any other questions about what's going on with Node?
Those engines,
Mhm.
V8 and the Firefox one, are they made by the browser companies or third parties?
That's a really good question. So Chrome is based off of a browser called Chromium, which is open source. That's just, and like 90% of the developers work for Google, but it's technically an open source project. You can contribute to it too. Chrome is Google's proprietary version of that has some very Google-specific magic features on top. But the underlying like rendering engine and JavaScript engine are open source. Other questions? Yeah, Christy.
Does Node have tables, or is it just a whole bunch of information?
What do you mean by tables?
Like when you're creating a database with it?
Oh, sure. So to that extent, it works just like Ruby does, where we can use a database's protocol to communicate with it. We just install that database, we install that database's driver, and we tell Node.js, hey, connect to this database and send this query. And then when I get the response back, I want to do this thing with the response.
So you need like a Sinatra or something like that.
Yeah, in fact, maybe the most popular Node project is called Express, which is Sinatra written in JavaScript. And actually, let's use that to kind of get into the NPM world. So You saw, no tricks up my sleeve. That's all I got so far. If I do npm init, it's going to say, cool, well, I'm going to help you make a package JSON file. I'm going to call this demo express. And it is version 0.0.1, and this is showing the studs express. Its entry point is index.js. The test command is Mocha, whatever. Doesn't have a git repo. That's keyword. I wrote it. MIT license. Cool. And so then the thing that changed is it made this package JSON file. If we take a look inside that, that's what it wrote for us. This is exactly, like it is one-to-one comparable to what? That you know already. Nope, it is written in JSON. Think back to mod 2.
Just gem file?
It's a gem file. Same kind of idea. What it's going to do is it's going to list out packages we want installed and some metadata. And this scripts thing, this is a rake file. I can put commands in here and it'll say what Unix thing that should be equivalent to. And so it's really common to have something like, I want to be able to do npm start, and whenever you type that in, I want you to do node index.js. Now I don't have to type node index.js. I can like npm start. It does the same thing. So if I want to install Express, I do npm install, and this is a little bit different than Rails. I do npm install -- save Express. If you do npm install Express, it will install it on this project, but it won't put it in that package JSON file. And we'll see why that sucks in a second. If I look at what changed in package JSON, now it depends on that version of Express. And check this out. Now I have this node modules folder. If I go into here, holy smokes, it installed all of these NPM packages. Because Express depends on all these. Now, the cool thing about this is something I think that Node does way better than the Ruby ecosystem. All I need to do is commit my package JSON file. I don't want to commit my node modules folder. That's like no number 1. So I make a .getignore file, and in here I just add node modules. So now when I git init to make a new repo, do git status, node modules isn't there. Why? Why do I care about that? Why don't I want to commit my node modules?
Because it just makes your repository big for no reason, because these are all local packages.
Yeah. That node modules folder can get real damn big. Let's take a look at the developed env one. So if I go over, ooh, I don't think I did npm install. So this one has a package.json file. It has all these dependencies, and it has all these dev dependencies. These are things that when I push it up to Heroku doesn't need these. I just need them while I'm writing it. And it's things like TypeScript and some of these kinds of things. If I npm install, it just downloads all of those packages. Hey, it's just like bundle install. What do you know? All right, so it does that. Now I have this node modules folder. And that's still pretty small. But 13K compared to a couple bytes, and then get out of control. That can become a gigabyte easily. You want to push that up to GitHub? Somebody downloads your repo, you want to force them to download all that? So we give them the package JSON file, and it's instructions on how to get all the dependencies, not the dependencies themselves. Let's just pass around these teeny tiny repos. All right, back to, all right, so I installed Express the way that you use Express. This is really similar to what you did, what you do with React, slightly different syntax. So we say const express equals require express. Any guesses what that syntax would be with Webpack, the stuff we've been using with React? These do the same thing. But import's kind of new. It's mainly targeted at browsers. Require was the original package tool for JavaScript. It's built into Node. It's part of it. Works the same way. It has some very slight differences that are not important to you right now. But that's how we get packages in Node. All right, so I have Express. And then I say app, or const app equals. What does that tell you about what Express is? This thing that I just brought in. It's a function. Okay. And then the thing that comes back from that function has a method called listen on it. And we pick a port. All right, I want to listen on port 9000. And then this is the Sinatra part. If I call the get method on that, all right, if I try to get the root, this is the request object, this is the response object, and then if I call response.send, then if I do a get request to that root, I should get that string back. Neat. So I do NPM start, and it's running. Then if I go localhost 9000, Ponce, this is the curse of my life. Come on, man. Oops. So I NPM start this. I do a get request over there. There's my string. That's web servers in Node. Pretty damn easy. Now, let's say I want to install another package. I'm a big fan of Lodash for tons of reasons. I'm going to npm save dev Lodash. Okay, so I added Lodash. I can hop in here. It is traditional to bring that in as an underscore. And now that underscore has all the Lodash methods on it. So I could do something like lodash.map and take in an array and give it a function and return item times 2. And now I can send it back as a JSON response. So if I do that, shut up. Start up the server again, I get a JSON response with 2, 4, and 6. Ta-da, that's Node, that's NPM packages. The last thing I want to show you on this, and then it'll be your turn, is if we look in this node modules folder, let's take a look at Express. Hey, what do you know? There's an index.js file. And it's exporting, module that exports is the same as export default in the browser. So what's requiring in this file? libexpress, all right. And then if I go into libexpress, holy cow, that's all of Express. And let's see, the exports for this is create application, which is a function. There you go. So over here, where I did this app equals express invoked, it called this function and returned this thing. That's all a node module is. It's just some code that somebody else wrote. And it's kind of like GitHub. They're all hosted on npmjs.org. And if we look up Lodash, cool. Here's all the instructions on how to use it. It also gives you information on how often it's downloaded. Almost 24 million times a week. It's probably pretty solid. But that's important because as you're evaluating these things, you'll run across all kinds of projects that have 1 to 5 weekly downloads, probably a little bit less reliable. How many open issues they have, all that kind of stuff. The GitHub repo, all that stuff is linked here. You look up Express. Tons of instructions on how to get started with it. Links to the repo, links to the docs. Downloaded a lot. And this isn't only for like the web elite. Hey, I know that jerk. This was a tool that I built for using Google Sheets as a database. And it gets 15 downloads a week, damn it. Point being, you can just make one of these things. What you do is you go over here and you go NPM publish. And now, whatever you named it, Demo Express, whatever, now other people can NPM install that. Ta-da! Now, the thing that, right after you're like, holy cow, that's really cool, the internet democratizes everything, the next feeling you should have is like, oh shit, you mean anybody can publish one of these things? Yeah. Which is why we don't want you to sudo npm install anything ever, because you just gave whatever random jackass who wanted to publish something to npm administrative privileges to your computer. Don't do that. Yeah.
I was asked in like a couple Java interviews if I ever NPM published something, and I
Yeah, yeah.
That stuff comes up. And then a lot of people were also exploiting vulnerabilities through that same process. Like, here's my business card. Also, I'm stealing all your information.
Yep.
It's pretty crazy.
Because the other things I can do is I can say, how about I put a file in my home directory. And I'm going to put that in a file called top secret. The other thing you can do is we can bring in FS. That's a way to work with your file system. And I can say fs.read and let's see, this needs a path, and I believe an encoding, and a callback. But if I forget how fs.read works, I can go to the Node.js docs and it'll tell me. All right, it's got fs.read. Is it read file? There we go. All right, fs.read file. And then data. That's right. Cool. Let's see what happens if I run this buddy. Right. Yep, didn't do it. I could have swore that needed an encoding though. Yeah. There we go. All right, running the server. Nothing. Nothing back from the response. Interesting. Maybe it needs to be from the root. So that would be this /home/Kyle/top secret maybe. Users K-Coberly there. /users K-Coberly top secret. All right, let's try that. There we go. So if I had that hidden away in that node modules folder, you can imagine there's probably some pretty standard naming conventions that, like, you only need a couple bytes to make some money. Please don't sudo install things. Cool. That's everything you need to know about packages, Node. Oh yeah, and then let's talk about front end real quick. That exact same shit. If we go over to some React project, all right, here's React practice. Hey, weird. That has a node modules folder too. That also has a package JSON. I can take a look at your package JSON file, and I can see these scripts that you can run. So I can do npm start. Anything that isn't start or test, you have to do run also. So you do npm run build, npm run eject. You do npm start, npm test. So those are the commands that I can run. These are my dependencies. So I can do npm start. All right, and then I've got this app running. What do I do if I want to add Lodash to this project?
-I
Oop, not dash I, could guess.
-save.
I dash dash save, then the name of the package.
Is there a reason you did dash dev last time?
Yes, so just to show you how that works, if there's something that you only need to do to write the app, but you don't need to do to run the app, that's a dev dependency versus a dependency. All right, so this has Lodash in there now. If I go over to source, app.js, and over here I want to have some Lodash thing. Then up here I can do const some Lodash thing equals import underscore from Lodash, and some Lodash thing is going to be underscore dot map, takes in the data and a thing we want to do with it. Cool, so that should show up somewhere in the app when we run it. npm start. Cool. That's it. So, your turn. What I want you to do is take any React app you have and see if you can, if you want to just copy the Lodash thing I did, that's fine. But get it installed, get it showing up in the app. I'll pull up mine.
How do you use Lodash? What's that? Or like, what did you do with it?
So I imported it,
Yeah.
and then Lodash has its own version of map that's slightly different than like array.map. But it works the same way. It takes in some data and then a function. Save it in a variable, make it show up on the page. Go. it's, yeah. This thing is using 2 spaces, which Old Man Code really doesn't care for. There you go.
You would do it like that? I guess because the return pushes it over.
Yeah, and like that is actually one of the reasons that I do actually sort of like the surround it all in parentheses thing, because then it makes that a little bit less stupid. If some Lodash thing was too dense for you, this is the exact same thing. That made more sense.
What's the deal with the vulnerabilities?
It's fairly new to NPM, but it's just letting you know that some dependency of a dependency of a dependency of a dependency is out of date and like had some security vulnerability associated with it. So you can, there's a command you can run that's npm audit fix, and it'll just automatically attempt to fix all of those dependencies, usually just by upgrading versions. All right, give me a fist of 5 on this. Fist is what were we doing, and 5 is cool, I got it to work. Okay, let's give this another minute. What you got?
I just got something to show the console in the terminal.
Okay.
But
Cool. Any React app that you've done.
I forgot what I ran to make it show, is, hold on, I don't find it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good job. Awesome. Now see if you can get something installed on a React app. Works the same way. Okay, cool. So some popular NPM packages. Let's take a peek. Subtypes. So, some I'll direct your attention to. React. React is an NPM package because we install it, we run it kind of like a server, but we're just using it to generate JavaScript, HTML, CSS. So we sort of use it like a server, even though we're using it to create front-end stuff. Moment. I actually don't like Moment, but I love the problem that it solves. The second you find yourself writing ways to calculate anything with time or date, fucking stop. You are going to get it wrong. Time and date are the most complicated things like in all of math. So you want libraries that can take into account leap seconds and time zones and all that kind of stuff for you. So moment is one such thing that you can use it to pass around objects, format them different ways, like subtract days from each other. Always use a library for that. Never do your own date math. We talked about express. Fetch does not work in Node apps. Anybody know why? It's kind of counterintuitive. Fetch isn't part of JavaScript. Fetch is part of browsers. It is owned by the browser spec people, not the ECMAScript people. It's technically part of the window object. And we don't have a window object in Node. So there's no such thing as fetch. There's that same idea, and you can actually install node-fetch as an NPM package and get fetch, and it works the exact same way. But request was a really popular alternative to that. And a lot of times with things like request, or probably the most popular one right now is called Axios. You don't need to do that like .json thing. It figures it out for you. Talked about Lodash. It's a bigger debug library. Let's see, other stuff. Browserify. I love this one. In the days before Webpack and like the React scripts and all that kind of stuff, you could use Browserify to write apps with modules and require and all that kind of stuff. Then you run Browserify on it, it goes and makes it so that it can run on your browser. Grunt was a predecessor to Webpack. Socket.io. This one's kind of out of scope for the program, but real good for like your first couple months after. Sockets are how you do real-time chat, that kind of stuff. It doesn't use HTTP, it uses TCP, which is right below HTTP, and allows you to do real-time features. Socket.io is a killer library for doing that. Mocha, testing library. You want to write JavaScript tests? Mocha is the one that most people use. Bower was an alternative to NPM that you had to install with NPM. Underscore is the predecessor to Lodash. Uglify was takes your code and then mangles it so that it gets smaller, but still works the same. So when you look at your code and it's like a fat arrow, goofy characters, like Uglify is the thing that does that. Cheerio is, hey, I know we're not a browser, but can we take something that sort of looks like HTML and like run query selector and that kind of stuff so that we can do things like web scraping? Cheerio is the tool for that. Passport is the auth tool that everybody uses in the Node world. Node Mailer is what, if you got notifications for Develop Denver, like, hey, hooray, you're going to the conference. I sent those with Node Mailer. Happy is an alternative to Express, React. Karma is another testing tool. Pug is kind of like, you can do the same thing that we used to do in Rails, where you just do templates and have your web server send down HTML strings. Pug is kind of like ERB. Database connections. Less is a styling tool. MongoDB. Morgan is it's named after Derek Morgan. Yeah, whoever Dexter Morgan, because he's a forensic scientist or whatever. It's a logging tool, so you get really cool, awesome logs for your app. Webpack, Angular. JS DOM, that's another like, how can I pretend like I have a DOM without a browser? Cool. So there's some ideas. Like the one that you'll probably immediately get the most mileage out of, but this is definitely extra credit kind of shit, is Lodash. Lodash is just a collection of tons of utility functions that you should never write yourself. For example, difference. Here's two arrays. What values are only in one of them? Subtracting arrays, it's not built into JavaScript. It is also a very solved problem, so you can just use Lodashes. Or, let's see, tail. Can I get everything but the first element of this array? There's a lot of algorithms that benefit from that. Union. Can I just get only unique values from this collection of arrays? Flat map. Can I map over this, and if it ends up being an array of arrays, can you flatten that out so it's all just one array? And then some of these, like map, they exist in regular JavaScript, but it's usually way more robust and works. For example, this also works on objects, just like map did with hashes and Ruby. But yeah, it's all these little teensy tiny functions.
Does it have like the sample?
Yep. And oh, I love clamp. They give you this number. If it's not within this range, can you clamp it so that it is? Like, you've probably written things like that before.
Well, the clamp is in Ruby.
Yes, that's right. Here's your sample. Or no, that's random. There's sample also. Whoa. Sample. There we go. Get a random element from a collection. But collections in Lodash world are arrays or objects. So you can get a random key value pair from sample also. Baller. All right, I think that's all I had to talk about. Any questions?
When you do NPM installs gem packages under the dev, I mean, not gem, dev. If you install them under dev, what's the difference? Like, how do you specify to install only those?
That's a great question. So what it does is it will look for the presence of node env, echo. And it's probably not set. If it's not set, it installs everything. On servers, like the first thing you do, like when you Heroku deploy, one of the things you'll see is it's setting node env equal to production. If that's set, it doesn't install the dependencies, the dev dependencies. And there's a lot of things in the node world that work that way. This works the same way in Rails, where it's looking for, all right, are we in testing? Are we in development? Are we in staging? Are we in production? And so you can use that to have slightly different behavior, like not installing everything you used to build it along with it, which makes your install size smaller. And if you have 1 billion servers, like every little bit counts. Other questions? That's a Unix thing. So what Echo does is it takes whatever you give it and just makes it show up on the screen. And you go, hell, hey, that doesn't sound all that useful. Except you also have all these variables in Unix that you can use in scripts and print out to the screen and that kind of stuff. The other thing, and this is also kind of beyond this program, but you might have noticed I did something like some string, and then you can redirect that into a file. And now I have some file there, and if I take a look at it, it's got the thing I echoed out in. That's super useful for logs, anything like that. Other questions?
Did you go to the package.json?
Mm-hmm.
Is that an alias that you said for, I think what's the keyword?
These scripts.
Yeah, scripts. Are those aliases or are those?
Yep, that's it. That's exactly what they are. I can type react-scripts start, and it will start my app. Or I can type npm start. This gets really useful when these commands get long. For example, or something like react scripts start. npm start is the standard way to start your app. I don't need to know how you wired it up. I can just do npm start, and there's a pretty good chance I'll be right. But you can also do really cool stuff, like look over the Develop Denver app. So I wrote these scripts that will do like 3 different kinds of testing and have all these flags and shit saved for that. And now I don't need to write all that monster ass line out by hand. Or on the server side for that, like similar kind of thing. I can set that node environment variable and have these kinds of long, complicated commands that have pretty short aliases. Cool. Other questions? All right. Our objective was to install packages with NPM. I think we generally did pretty good on that. So, thank you very much.